I followed Nick with some slides as well. So, good morning, Andrew Yuille. I've been well introduced, but I think what's interesting here is my role sits me between our customers, the regulated entities in effect, and technology businesses, advisories, and my own organisation, Thomson Reuters, really looking at how we can jointly form solutions for compliance and regulatory compliance issues. Predominantly in the financial services sector, but not uniquely so. But for today, I'm going to focus mainly into financial services. So a little bit about what we do, just briefly to set the scene. There are really three areas that we focus on, and actually the previous speakers have touched into some of these. We look at how we help organizations comply with regulation. We look particularly at the AML and KYC risks. I'm sure we'll touch on more of that as we get into the panel. And also in financial risk, particularly around regulatory reporting. There's a lot that we do there, and also understanding capital adequacy, liquidity, etc. So this sort of really at the center of regulation. Like most organizations, we've set up a labs arrangement, been investing in this very heavily over the last couple of years, working very closely with universities. But you'll find some of the locations that we put those in on the left quite interesting. Some are obvious, Boston, for example, but Cape Town may be less obvious, and the reason...
National Republican Institute. I would like to, what I'm going to say is more a comment than a question, but I would like to hear the opinion on my comment from the panelists if there is time. I think we are confusing certain terms, and I think to discuss ideology, to discuss liberal democracy, we have to try to terms equally.
Something I said?
I don't think we can define it. That the term liberal democracy and as the term liberalism.
Right.
All right. So sorry about this.
That's okay. I was a little worried that question was going in a direction that I wasn't certain was on topic, but hey, there you go. That all gets interesting.
Okay. Apologies for this.
No worries at all. So back on track. So Centres for Innovation. South Africa, there's some very interesting work going on down there, and the financial services sector, working with the regulator there, are doing some very interesting things. Again, topic perhaps for the panel conversation a little later. Where are we? Okay, so one of the things that we spend quite a bit of time doing is talking to customers and understanding how they're reacting to various activities. We've just recently published a report on RegTech and FinTech, and I'm going to come at a definition of that in a little while. But I'm going to share some of the results of that as I go through here. But this was a question we asked at a conference in Australia on their reaction to the local FinTech sandbox. And I thought the capturing of opportunity, innovative, and the reaction generally from what was a financial services audience was interesting. If you would like some copies of those reports, find me afterwards, and I'll very happily share one of them with you later. Financial services, I think, is a sector which has had a long history of disruptive innovation. And I think it's one that, as we look at RegTech, will therefore hold real opportunity. Retail banking has quickly evolved from branches through to online banking, ATMs, internet banking, has relentlessly marched forwards. And indeed, I think
also, we have to be clear about it.
The use of cash is even in question now with contactless payments. I'm looking forward to that question. But one of the things that has been consistent has been the growth in regulation. And if you subscribe to the Thomson Reuters service, you will have seen this. Every day we publish about 200 regulatory events which regulators around the world have triggered. 200. If you filtered and used our product, you can get it down to a bit less than that. But every single day, the compliance teams of the world are faced with 200 things that have happened. It could be Nick making a speech somewhere, that's meaningful, but it could actually be a change in a line of regulation somewhere that compliance teams are having to cope with. What's more interesting, or equally interesting, is when you map the rise of that on the top graph, you'll see in 2008 it was at about 6,000. Last year we tracked about 51,000 changes in regulation. 51,000 changes in regulation for financial services. At the bottom, when we go and ask compliance teams what's going to happen next year, most of them don't recognise that despite what's happened since the crash, that regulation is going to increase in the following year. And that's, that's an interesting challenge for that group because they're probably not planning for it. But what's the cost of compliance? What's the opportunity for fintech? I've pulled this from various press announcements, not our own, quite deliberately. Citi have got about 30,000 employees they publish working in compliance. That was up about a third in that year. HSBC over on the right planned to add 3,000, ended up adding 5,000, just another 2,000 extra. I think their financial reports for 2015 showed they're spending about $4 billion, HSBC, on onboarding customers and about $4 billion on compliance and regulatory compliance. That's $8 billion on what I see as admin. So I think that's the opportunity. Of course, the reason why, if you look at the graphs over on the right-hand side, is the cost of getting it wrong is really high. The HSBC fine pales into insignificance compared with the Bank of America fines, and that's only looking at the US regulators. So that's why the heads are going in, but there's clear opportunity for cost savings and doing regulation better. Okay, we'll skip over a few of these. When we look at the benefits of RegTech, what do people see in the next 12 months? Well, no big surprise when we ask the compliance teams, improved efficiency and productivity comes through most strongly. Cost reduction. One of the areas it's been touched on where there could be huge strides. So if we come back, 51,000 changes in regulation, 200 a day, a lot of those people sat there are looking at those regulations, those speeches, those comments that matter, and trying to figure out how they impact their business. And frankly, most don't. But they are not machine readable. They are really hard to get around. And one of the things we've worked on over a number of years now, released it at the end of last year, is a taxonomy for regulation. You can see we've mapped it to 5 sectors. Below that, there's about another 30 level 2s. And you get down to the sort of the minutiae, the thing you actually need to get to is about 270 third levels below those 5. The point still being that when you've got to that, you're still going to need the Mark I human eyeball to be able to understand what the regulator is saying and what is actually the obligation. That requires a massive investment. So coming to a common vocabulary, coming to a common way of working, making these things more machine readable will make an enormous impact on what frankly is just cost, which will ultimately get passed through like any cost of any business to the consumer. What's the board expecting looking out to 2017? Well, their biggest problem when they look at compliance is, no surprise, implementation of regulatory change programs. One of the things we've seen specifically from the UK regulator with the introduction of the senior managers certification regime is senior managers taking an interest in a way they never have done before in what compliance does and starting to ask some quite groundbreaking questions around could it be done better? Do we need lots of point solutions, departmental systems, etc., or is there a more systemic workflow approach that could be taken? So thank you. I'm looking forward to the debate. I'm looking forward to some questions that maybe are a little on topic. Thank you.